Welcome to Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we break the silence, build community, and ignite hope. We're here to talk about what really matters: mental health, wellness, and the conversations that help us all feel seen and supported. Every episode will bring real stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you navigate mental wellness and suicide prevention. Because together, we can change the conversation. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Glow for Hope, sparking conversation on mental health, where we're having real conversations about mental health and suicide prevention. Because when we start talking, we start changing lives. I'm your host, Kelly Pelker, and today's conversation is one I think so many people are going to relate to. That feeling of being off, mentally foggy, overwhelmed, exhausted, like you're showing up in your life, but not really feeling like yourself. And the questions become, what is actually going on, not just emotionally, but in the brain? Our guest today is Dr. Patrick Porter, founder of BrainTap and a leader in neuroscience-based approaches to brain health. For over 30 years, he's been studying how the brain responds to stress, and more importantly, how we can support it in a way that helps people feel like themselves again. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. It's great to be here. My middle name's Kelly too, by the way, so I like that name.
Oh, awesome. I never knew that. I knew there was a K, but I didn't know what it
Yeah.
was for.
Okay.
It just dawned on me today, too, that our timing on this is great because this is Stress Awareness Month.
All right. Yes.
Yeah. So many listening right now are simply functioning. They're going to work, showing up for their families, doing everything they're supposed to do, but inside they feel foggy, flat, depleted, like a version of themselves they don't recognize. What is actually happening in the brain in that state?
Yeah. Well, it's happening in the whole body, so I'll kind of explain that to you because the brain we have today was not designed for the lifestyle we're living. Right? I mean, these bodies have been around for a couple 100,000 years, and we've only had all this technology. And there's really only four reasons somebody has a brain problem. One is a traumatic event happened. You know, they got in an accident or a sporting accident or something like that, and their brain got injured. Number two, it could be their foods they're consuming. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Some foods they can do to become neuroprotective and save their brain. Number three, it could be their thoughts. We now know that, as you said at the beginning, speaking is a good place to start. Start talking about it. But then we have to reframe it in a way that it doesn't bring up the bad emotions and things of that nature. So we can talk a little bit about that. And then number four is technology. I mean, never in the history of time have we been exposed to so much artificial light, so much EMF waves. These are all things that are actually happening to the body. So I'll start off by saying that every cell of your body has something called a mirror neuron. And that mirror neuron is actually evaluating your environment. So whether you have mold toxicity in your home, you might not even know about it. You might think you have a cold. And you just go through it, and the brain says, you know what? That must not be a problem. So I'll stop sending the signal. But you still have all the underlying stress of being in that environment. Your house air, for instance, 200 times dirtier than the air outside. So just opening your doors and windows every once in a while, getting some clean air is going to make a difference. Or buy some kind of air purifier that has a good HEPA filter or something like that. You get your air filled clean. The other is that water is so important, but it's got to be filtered water, clean water, uh, because the water, even though it's safe to drink out of the faucet, it's not going to kill you today. There's a lot of things in there that you don't want in your body, and there's a lot of really good purifiers out there. But we should be drinking half our body's weight in ounces of water. And if you drink coffee, you have to double it because coffee is a diuretic. So that means that, and your brain is a hydro engine. So if you really want your brain to run efficiently, it needs fat and it needs water. So the fat that you want to consume is a really high grade quality, uh, uh, like olive oil. You can get it like California farmers, something like that. Somewhere where it's real, olive oil. If you do 1 tablespoon of that every day, either make it part of your salad, put in Italian spices on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to reduce your risk of dementia by almost 40%.
That's
So,
amazing.
the studies are pretty clear about that. Most people don't get the fats they need. They're pretty good at avoiding the negative fats. They know the potato chips and things like that are bad for them, but there's also good fats that we need, our body needs. Technology too, and then we'll get into some other questions, but just in a broad stroke, technology is great. I don't think anybody's going to get rid of their big screen televisions or their phones today.
Mhm.
But let's say that you're an average user on your cell phone. They say the average person looks at their cell phone 300 times a day. Okay. Now, if you're an optimist, one of the biggest things they know about brain health and just physical health in general is your mindset plays a big role. That's where your thoughts come in. So if
Mhm.
you look at your life as a series of challenges and you rise to the occasion, MIT actually did a whole report about 14 weeks ago that showed that when you have a challenge mindset, you actually upgrade every DNA pair in your body because they're changing every 40 seconds. So if you look at it as a threat, like you get your phone and you get bad news, and you get what happens there, or you get stress news, let's say that, and you're just sitting there looking at your phone, you're not doing anything. So,
Mhm.
but your liver holds 25 grams of sugar and it's there to protect you. So if a saber-toothed tiger comes around the corner, you can run, or a bear or something like that, but we don't get too many bears or lions anymore, but we get text, we get phone calls, we get traffic, something happens in traffic. All of those things are causing our liver to go out of balance. And that's why you'll see the rise in fatty liver disease out there. It's crazy. I mean, it's like,
Guilty.
yeah, so many people have it. Well, when you pump out 25 grams of sugar, then you start the insulin drip, and that insulin drip is to protect you too, because you can't have more than 1 tablespoon of circulating sugar in your bloodstream at any one time. You just dump 25 grams in and you're not running. You're just sitting there. So what's going to happen is your body is going to produce insulin, which is a fat storage hormone. So what it does, it tells the body, build fat, protect this person, put the sugar in there. And then unfortunately, what happens is then you have insulin resistance. So
Right.
now you're chasing sugar all day long, and it could lead to diabetes. And you didn't even eat a candy bar. All you did was stress out. So the number one thing that we need to help everyone listening to this, especially for suicide prevention, is sleeping better. Sleep is where you do 99% of all of your neurological activity. So we think we're smart when we're awake. We're super smart when we're sleeping. But it, but we and the key for that being such a neurological part of your brain is that every night when you sleep, imagine you and I, Kelly, we're sitting in medical school. It's 2015. We're learning about the lymphatic system. And we're learning that the lymphatic system is the garbage man of the system. It takes all the toxins. Remember, toxins was number two in my thing. So all these
Mhm.
toxins in your brain from just metabolism. I mean, just doing whatever. And maybe you have a good diet, maybe you don't. But your brain has protective measures to keep you from, being too toxic in the brain. And of course, alcohol can bypass that and a lot of other things. But you know, your brain has a lot of toxins. So what they found out was the minimum amount of deep sleep that you need is 1 hour. So you don't get it all at once. Now, some of your listeners might have been sleeping at one time and they woke up, but they couldn't move their body. We call it sleep paralysis in psychology. So some people wake up with sleep paralysis. No, what you did is you woke up in the middle of a cleaning cycle. So
Mm.
imagine your brain's being cleaned. It's going to be taken offline for just a millisecond. It seems like forever,
Like
but it's just
rebooting your computer.
yes, it's just like rebooting your computer. During that time, the this part of the system in 2015 during a sleep study in Denmark, a doctor realizes there's another part of the body, all the cadavers that they've opened up before that time, everything they've looked at the human body, they didn't even know it existed until 2015, and they call it the glial lymphatic system. And it only operates during sleep. So when you think about when sleep used to be like, I know when I was growing up in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, if I got 5 hours sleep, I was bragging to everybody. I only got 5 hours sleep. I'm great. I can
Right.
do, now I'm 65 and go, damn, I only got 5 hours sleep. What am I going to do? You're kind of working on that. So the reality is we need 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM because REM is super important, especially to keep your mind clear, focused, directed. When we wake up in the morning, we should be a little nervous. We should be a little excited. It's a new day. We've planned it in our mind all night long. We've planned our behaviors, our attitudes, our beliefs. We've structured everything, and it all happened within the first 2 hours of going to sleep. Because whatever you watched, whatever you listened to, whatever conversation you had before you went to bed, those seem to be the dreams that kind of lead us into nighttime rest. So I always tell people your sleep starts in the morning, but you set the TV, your inner mind's TV to what you want to watch just before bed. So I would choose wisely, maybe comedies, keep the news off, past 9 o'clock or something like that, because you're not going
I
to get
don't
enough.
turn the news on at all.
That's good. It's good. That's good. I always tell people if you're too happy, I have a solution for that. Just turn on CNN. They're going to depress you in no time. So,
Uh,
but we have this. If you can start turning off the lights in your home, 2 or 3 hours before going to bed, this signals your brain, hey. And there's something called the circadian clock,
mhm.
which most people know about it. They go, if we can get to bed by 10 o'clock, and I know a lot of people go, 10 o'clock. I get up at 6 in the morning. I can't get up. I can't go to bed at 10. Well, that's 8 hours. What are you talking about? What you need is 6.5 hours of really good sleep. That's what all sleep studies say. But most people don't get that. So they might take them 8 hours to do this because it's all done in little spurts. So what I always recommend people that if they're having any mental disorders that they feel are are organic or just a lifestyle issue, if they're not, they need to go to a professional. But then first thing you need to do is work on your sleep. Second thing
Mhm.
is work on stress resilience, because we are being hammered daily by stress. And how is your brain handling that? That's where that REM sleep comes in, because
How
REM sleep, you have access to that.
how accurate are Fitbits and sleep trackers and stuff like that?
Well, that's kind of up for debate because they keep changing their numbers and things like this. It's mainly because they're using two functions like the SDNN and the RDDNN, and these two numbers you can mathematically be pretty close
Mhm.
to what you get in a sleep study. But if you're using Oura Ring or using Whoop or using something, just use the same one. You're probably going to be all right. Um, we don't have one that you wear actively or live, so we use something called the Circle Ring here in research. It's a
Mhm.
very affordable ring that you wear. It's like under $300, and there's no monthly subscription, so you can measure your brain and body activities, and they're really good data, as close as you can get to your you're not all hooked up like you do when you go to a sleep lab or something like that.
But it's at least a good indicator
Yes,
rather than having nothing, right?
yeah, and I always tell people, don't live your life by it. Just because it said you had a bad night's sleep or something doesn't mean anything. You
Hmm.
can correct that by doing some breath work or doing a meditation or doing BrainTap or something. You can do something to change your state of mind.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reality is that until you know what's causing you to not sleep, a lot of people think it's normal not to sleep as you age. That's not true at all. They go, well, I have to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Well, that's not true either. That's true that you do get up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom, but you have a circulating pump on your kidneys. You should be able to drink a gallon of water and sleep all night long. It's just that your regulation of your system, your nervous system is not right. So as soon as you pop up into a little bit of beta brain waves, which is the wide awake brain wave, you're being told go to the bathroom.
I need to send that clip right there to my mother.
Yeah, yeah. So once you start like just kind of bring it full circle so the listeners know you can do it, of course, with the technology I invented, but you can also use breath work. So if you don't have the money to buy it, we do have a 14-day free trial. They can go to trybraintap.com but and get better sleep. But if they start in the morning with doing a psychological breath, your breathing is so connected to your nervous system, and
Mhm.
70% of your nervous system is your brain. So when somebody's saying your nervous system, what they're really saying is your brain in all its extremities, because your arm doesn't move until your brain tells it to, and so on and so forth. So the brain is really important there. So in the morning, the psychological breath is very simple. You breathe in as quickly as possible, hold it for a second. That's going to turn on your sympathetic system. That's your fight or flight. You want to trigger that part of your body, even though it's uncomfortable. You feel a little bit. Then you breathe out
Mhm.
as slowly as possible, but completely go to the side. Just let it go. I usually recommend people do this in their own bathroom, not in front of their family, because they might think something's going on.
I've
But
done Dr. Pavlik's session on the morning breath work one,
yeah,
and I did it one time. And my husband came in the room. He's like, "What the heck are you
yeah,
doing?"
right. Yeah, yeah. They
Uh,
don't. But what you're doing is you're exercising your nervous system. So it's different than lifting weights or doing other things, and your breathing will improve. In the middle of the day, we always recommend the box breathing.
mhm.
Now, the Navy SEALs all learn box breathing. So imagine you're one of six people, you're going to go take on that battleship. I don't care how big and bold you are, you're going to get nervous. There's going to be a little fear there.
Right.
So what they notice is it calms down the sympathetic system and puts you back into balance with the parasympathetic. And when you get into parasympathetic, that's when your brain finally gets a chance. Like if somebody goes, if I just had a moment, if I just could just get away from it all. Well, you have to set that moment. You have to train your brain to get into that moment, because life isn't. life isn't against you. It's just not for you.
Hmm.
It's like it's for itself. Every person out there, there's people don't get up every morning and go, "Gosh, I'm going to go after Kelly today." I hope not. There. But some days it seems that way. Like they
It sure
cut you off in
does.
traffic, or they do, things like that. But they really don't even know you exist.
Mhm.
They're in their own little world, doing their own little thing, doing everything, and we put meaning on what they do, but it could be totally far off. So I always tell people, just people are doing the best they can with the information they have at hand. We can change our perception. We can't change theirs. But
Right.
sometimes we change our perception, they change. So that's the way the old quote goes. So, and then at night when you go to bed, after you're done with everything you're going to do at night, you're all ready for bed, you're laying down on the pillow, your eyes are closed, your partner, if you're in bed with a partner, their eyes are closed. They don't know what you're doing. They don't have to know what you're doing. You breathe into the count of four, and then while you're breathing into the count of four, you're kind of reviewing your day. What happened today? Instead of waiting, don't put it off. If something bad happened, go through it, because as you breathe out, you're going to start to think of all the different solutions. What could you have done differently today? And then you're going to role play in your mind, and you're going to put together a success reel, because every day something wonderful happens. Something happens. Somebody says hi to you. The dog walks up and you get to pet him, or whatever happens, there's something. We want to get the brain to start to selectively choose positive events and store and categorize them. And that's what you want to take to sleep with you. Because then the brain, in most books, they'll call the brain a servo mechanism, meaning goal striving. So the brain is striving for a goal. That's why if you went to sleep with a military movie on, you might wake up in the middle of the night in a military scene. Your brain took all that images and thought it was real and is trying to solve the problem for you. Hey, you were in this war and this is how you're going to get out of it, even though it was not real. It was totally bogus. It was on TV, but your brain took it to be real. And so you started playing that out in your mind. That's why it's so important that
It's
the
wild to
2 hours
think.
before bed, we feed our brain just like we'd feed our body nutritious food so that we can get the rest we need. And I love comedy just because comedy unwires so many negative things. You really can't be laughing and smiling and feeling depressed. So
Yep.
I can't and I don't understand what's going on with television today, because I don't watch enough television to know, but uh, there's not a lot of comedies anymore. It's like everybody wants to do dark comedies or do something that's, because people want to feel again. They want to feel something, and I
Hmm.
don't think you want to feel the negative stuff. You want to feel the positive stuff. But if
Yep.
those are some little, like, just sleep hygiene, stress recovery. You can do those breathing techniques when you're sitting at the doctor's office at a stoplight. These are all things that are going to reset your nervous system and put you back in control. The way I usually tell people is it's like you're on the bus. You're handcuffed to the back. Freddy Krueger's driving, and you have no idea where he's going. And so, first thing we need to do is get the handcuffs off. You do have the skill set. We can teach you that. Everybody can learn to do that. It might take it might take you 10 times. It might take another person one time of doing it. But then you can learn how to do that. Kick Freddie off the bus, take control of the steering wheel and put people on the bus you can trust. You need a support team. Everyone needs a support team. And if
Yes.
you don't have a support team out there, you're going, gosh, I don't have a support team, then go find somewhere you can volunteer. Because when you volunteer, you give your time, not money, but I'm talking about time. You give your
Hmm.
time, you actually get a physiological benefit. Your body actually heals itself while you're working for other people for free. I mean, you're just doing it because you care. But what you'll do is you'll build relationships with people. The other people that are there are in the same boat as you. They're looking for community, looking for connection. One of the worst things that happened, of course, during 2020 was the disconnection everybody had. And
Yes.
everybody found out, yeah, I can work in a silo, but it's not as fun as being able to walk down the hall and talk to somebody or do the thing. And so many
Need
people
to
are
have
still
that
doing.
connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Connection is everything, especially for addiction. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have addiction happens in isolation typically.
Hmm.
So, we want to get people out there. There's a lot of service organizations that would love to have somebody give them a hand up, instead of a handout. Just what can you do? Can you go
Glow
support
for
some?
Hope's one of those.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Um, just going back to stress for just a minute. I mean, we hear the word stress all the time. But you talk about chronic stress and
Yes.
that actually creates changes in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's different than saying stress is bad for you. It actually makes physical changes to who you are,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Stress itself is not bad for you. I should say that. Stress is okay if you have recovery. But if you never get recovery, because you go from one stressful event to the next stressful event to the next stressful event to the next stressful event, and you just can't get out of that loop. It's just one negative cycle. Then your brain will start to predict your future based on those stressors. So if you don't
Right.
interrupt that pattern, basically, it's like the story of, five people hear about an investment, one person acts on it, goes, does it. The other four heard about it, they didn't act on it. All four of them heard about it, all five of them, but only one took action. So we need to have our opportunity ears on, I guess you'd say, and eyes, and see the world not as it's presented to us right now. Because whatever you're doing, you're going through right now, it's real for you. It's not
Mm-hmm.
made up. It's not fabricated. This is real stuff going on in your brain. But it's like a TV. You can change the channel, but you have to one of the easy things to do is start taking all those negative memories and making them black and white and putting them behind you, and seeing what kind of lesson you can learn from them. I love, there's a little guy on YouTube, and my friends send me these things all the time, and he's a little wrestler, and he took seventh place, and he's all excited, and he says, we don't lose here, we learn. And I thought, that's a great attitude.
It
You know what I
is.
mean? You don't lose, you learn. That's the way life works. I mean, you can either continue to duplicate the same patterns, get the same results, or you can start changing up one or two things. And if it changes in the better, then make one or two more changes. Don't try to eat that whole elephant in one setting. You get indigestion. So, a lot of people say, I just need my whole life to change. I need to move. I need to get a new relationship. I need to do. No, the relationship that we need to work on is listening right now. It's you, because you're the cornerstone of all relationships. So if your relationships aren't working, it's sad to say, but it's you that needs to change. The whole world isn't going to change to support your beliefs in relationships. So what about those beliefs and those relationships are holding you back from experiencing one that is full of love and trust and joy and all those things? And don't settle. So many, we're so used to in this world that we think it's multiple choice and we have to choose one. We can say, no, give us four more choices. You don't have to be stuck with anything, but that takes someone who looks at life as a challenge rather than a threat. You
Yeah.
know, we
That
want to,
reminds me, a friend of mine wrote a book called Go With Your Gut. And
yeah,
it's like there's a part of that is that you're not confused. There's no
right,
such thing as confusion. You just don't like your choices.
right. Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah,
goes along with
like
that.
I call depression compression, because most people go inside and they don't like the answer. So they just stay inside. No, you got to take it might be one thing I can tell you, whatever that bad thing is that you have to do that's hopefully legally and morally right, but you have to do it, but it doesn't feel right to you. Once you do it, you're going to feel so much better. But the more you hold on to the negativity around it, and for me, I mean, I've had businesses for years, so I've had to let people go that I really liked, but they didn't work out.
Yeah.
And, I try to remain friends with them or whatever. And most of the times it did work out. Even my ex-wife, we're still friends today. And that was 40 years ago. Because I said, we couldn't live together. We had a child, and I said, sure, he doesn't have to put up with this. We're just not going in the same directions. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to be friends, and we're going to make this work because this is the way it is today. And thank God for me, it was, and my new wife, who I've been married 37 years with, they're best buddies. So, that's the way it works. You don't have to be an enemy just because you're not going to be with them or whatever the
Right.
relationship is. So but I think the main thing that I find with stress and changing the brain patterns is that people will automatically assume the worst sometimes, when, yeah, that is a possibility. And our brain does go there. But, some psychologists found that every time you have the best memory in your life, the worst memory in your life has to be present as well. It's because how do you know it's the best if you don't have it to go against the worst? But
Yeah,
it's
for
just
people like that have anxiety and stuff, and they kind of go always through those what ifs in their mind, and it's usually a what if worst case scenario type of thing. How do you really get somebody to understand that they can control that to a degree?
Yeah. Well, what I tell them, especially with our system, is you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. Just because you thought about it, that's the first step. Now you've got to rehearse it. I would hate to see one of the blockbuster movies where the actors didn't rehearse before they did that movie. But people
Mm-hmm.
will get up every morning and not rehearse what their day is going to be like. And then they wonder why they did the same thing they did yesterday, today. you've got to rehearse it in your mind. There's not a professional athlete that doesn't use some form of visualization. So I think it's underrated and it's too simple. There's a saying, spirit is simple, man is complex. We want everything to be so complex, but it's really an easy thing to do. And the thing is that when you have that negative thought, don't say you didn't have it. Don't try to get rid of it. It's just a thought. It's not an action. Thoughts are ancestors to action, but they're not the action, right? So you
Right.
have the thought, okay, fine. What's two other thoughts you could have that are the exact opposite? They would make it be, and maybe they'll never happen, but get your brain thinking, what if this were to happen? What if instead of getting an argument with this person every time, they said, you know what? I've started a new leaf. I'm never going to argue again. I'm just going to be happy. Go ahead, say whatever you want to say. And maybe it never happens in the real world, but it doesn't matter. It's happened in your world. And now
Right.
your brain starts to look for other opportunities to have that kind of experience rather than pigeonhole your relationship into that experience or your belief in your brain. Because a lot of people say, my brain's broken. All I can think of is negative thoughts. Well, negative thoughts are easy because you've replayed them in your mind over and over again. It's like a record that has those grooves in it, and the needle just follows those grooves. You've got to create new grooves. So that means it's going to take a little effort at first.
Hmm.
That's where giving energy to the brain. And when we talk about what's really costing us in all these things you're talking about is energy. I've never heard anybody go, I laughed so hard, had such a great time, I went home and crashed. No, they go, I was so excited, I was up, everything's, but they go, I had such a bad day, I cried all the way home from work, I hit the couch, I couldn't even make dinner, I just fell asleep on the couch, then went to bed, because it's draining your energy.
Yeah.
When your brain, now let's look at the brain. If I was to measure your brain as a child, Kelly, when you were born, your brain would have been about 18.1 volts. 100 billion neural bit processor. You knew nothing but learned everything within a couple of years. You became a little adult. You even started sorting out, different things. And if you learned more than one language, you could learn even more because now that language pattern program kept going. Now, as we age, though, get to be about 21, 25 years old, that brain voltage goes down to 10.1. Now
Hmm.
you have half the brain voltage you had as a child. So when somebody says, I used to just jump up in the morning and do, well, yeah, you had energy because you had a fresh vehicle. It's like having a new car. It had better pickup, better braking, better turning, whatever.
Right.
It was a little tighter. Everything in your body's a little tighter. But if and there's a book I'm writing actually called "Getting Old Isn't for Sissies," because people think these bodies, you've got to keep these bodies up. They're not maintenance free. They're maintenance free until you need maintenance from the people you don't want maintenance from. There's a sick care industry and there's a healthcare industry, and everybody thinks they're the same. They're not. Everybody listening here should go find them a healthcare practitioner, not a medical doctor. They could be the same thing. They could be
Good
a medical
advice.
doctor that's a healthcare practitioner. But a lot of if they're the type of person that says, you know what, you're not quite bad enough for me yet. Why don't you go home and get a little sicker, come back and we can do some more tests on you? Then that's the sick care industry. We want the person that says, you know what, you're doing all right, but what if we did this? What if you started doing this and that and see how you do, how you respond? Let's get you out in sunlight. Let's get you out grounding. Let's get you out doing some walking. Just some easy things that most people take for granted. And then see how your brain responds because our brain works not just in a vacuum, it works in its environment. And so, sometimes just getting out and getting a new view of your own neighborhood,
Hmm.
walking and meeting your neighbors and, doing things is going to make a big difference. And I can tell you right now, I've worked with hundreds of thousands of people over the years, and the ones that made it were the ones that decided to do it on their own. I was just a coach. I can't
Yep.
live their life for them. I can't go on the playing field and uh, make the decision to have a healthy meal over junk food and then wonder why my brain's spiraling out of control at night from sugar depletion, things of that nation. So, we have these different things that we do, but I think that our lifestyles today are not designed to have great brains. I mean, think about if you do any research like I've done on the brain, every ancient culture kept all the wisdom with the elders.
Hmm.
Now, if we did that in this day and age, we'd be in trouble because they're putting our elders into old folks' homes. They're not talking to them. They're not communicating with them. They're telling them they're going to get sicker and sicker and sicker, and they're going to die. And they're going to the last thing they're going to remember is they don't know because it's going to be some 2 years before they die. They're going to lose their memories, which isn't true at all. Your
I
brain
think
can
I think
heal anything.
Hawaii has a great culture in that
Yeah.
regard with
Yeah.
the elders.
Yeah. I think
It's
we need to adopt that again because we're going to lose a whole our tribal knowledge
mhm,
because they put screens in front of all the kids. The kids used to learn from their grandparents, not from their parents. The parents didn't have time.
mhm,
They were like me when I was a parent. I didn't have time for my kids. I did what I did to make money and you be there for them. My grandparents, spent time with them and trained them and taught them values and all those kind of things. And we're losing out on that. And I think if we don't have that, we need to find communities that can give us that.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. I you probably have no idea how much your brain tap device has impacted my life. But
Well,
it's
great.
fun to sit here with your face in here because I listen to your voice all the time. But I mean, I'll be honest with you. A few years ago, I went through kind of a perfect storm kind of thing. Found myself in a place mentally and emotionally that I didn't recognize, and a headspace I had never been in before. And that was about the time I was introduced to BrainTap, and I have it has changed. It's been a life changer for me. I've used it every day, nearly like for over 2 years, at least one to three times a day. And so let me thank you for doing that. I will say, when you talked about the negative thoughts, one of the things that I passed on to people that I learned from a session was to picture that big red stop sign.
Yeah.
That's been so it works.
Yeah. You
It,
just picture that stop sign, say stop, stop giving it energy, stop giving it life, stop giving it time. And then think of three other things. It could be crazy, but just think about them. Because what we're really building is a mechanism for the mind. You know,
Mhm.
think of those negatives. They like take reality from a particle and make it a wave or a wave into a particle, however you want to think about that, where it freezes time because all negative emotions have one thing in common: lack of breathing. So if we can get people to breathe through them, that's what the three things are about. Because in order to get those three thoughts, you usually take a breath in between them because your brain knows, hey, I need oxygen to do that. I need oxygen to make pictures and sounds and experiences. So the brain starts working again. And once we get the brain working, we live in the brain we have was designed to have these stressed out moments maybe 3 to 5 times a week. You think about it, you're living on the plains, you might run across some danger, every once in a while. It's not like the movies where every day somebody's trying to kill you. You're camping, for God's sake. We do that for fun now. So they're going about their business doing their thing, but then the stress happens, then they recover. They don't have to go right back into another meeting. They don't have to look at their phones. They don't have to deal with whatever's going on. So we need to have a fast-paced way to train our brain. Our brain is capable. They used to do in conferences, like, how many people think they use 5% of their brain? And nobody'd raise their hand. How many people think three? Oh yeah, I use 3%. No, the reality is that everybody uses 100% of your brain. They don't use 100% of its capacity. So
Good
imagine, it's kind of
distinction.
like, you have all these tools in your garage and you use them every once in a while, but you're not a master craftsman, so you don't know how to use them. The nice thing about innate intelligence, which is your brain and your body, they know how to heal themselves. Your brain knows how to heal itself. Your body knows how to heal itself. The problem is that these four factors that I talked about at the beginning of the show, they get in the way. And so we have to knock those out one at a time until we get the balance that we need so that we can start. And I still use my brain tap at least once or twice a day. And I invented it in the 80s. So, and somebody says, well, why do you use it? I said, because I got stress.
Hmm.
And I mean, if people like in sports, these world champions we have, I mean, they don't really need to use brain tap. They use it because they want to keep their brain functioning better. Somebody asked Tom Brady, why do you use brain tap? Because I want to recover faster, not because he's got a problem. You don't have so many people think they need a breakdown to have a breakthrough. The world is happening way too fast to wait for breakdowns now. If we wait for breakdowns now, we're in trouble. You start working on your brain now, getting more energy in. And by the way, with our dementia study that we did,
Hmm.
we did this in Florida with women 55, 65, all diagnosed with dementia. Within 6 weeks, their brain voltages were all over 7, and they no longer had the symptoms of dementia. And we
That's
know if your
amazing.
brain voltage goes below 4, you get Alzheimer's. So that energy, when you're using the headset, that light going into your eyes and your ears,
Hmm.
your hemoglobin is absorbing that light energy. It's carrying it into the brain. because your eyes are brain matter, and all the blood in your ears is what heats and cools the brain. So now we're bringing light energy into the brain. That light energy is starting something called the Krebs cycle. So, a little science class for the listeners. The Krebs cycle starts building what they call ATP, nitric oxide, vasodilation, blood flow, circulation. So now the glial lymphatic system works even better because you now have more ways to get toxins out. So the foggy mind goes away. The energy happens in the brain. And the reason that we have the 3 times a day is excellent is because in the morning we need to really improve a brainwave called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. That's what those AM sessions, the 10, they're a little more motivating, little faster pace maybe, and they get you to think about your day.
Hmm.
That's we call it digital coffee because it does trigger norepinephrine, cortisol and dopamine, all the things you need in the morning. And then in the afternoon, when you take your break, that's a biological reset that everybody has. Everybody's temperature drops 2 degrees at 2 in the afternoon. It's not because they have low blood sugar. Now, if you have low blood sugar, it might drop more than that and cause you to have, different things happening. But that blood sugar is more controlled by your body and your mind than it is by what you ate. Now once you get out of control, I'm not telling anybody to get off any diabetic medicine, but the biggest thing, if you and we have our people wear these, they wear the glucose monitors now, they do the 24-hour,
Hmm.
and they'll go, I wasn't even eating there. Why is the stress so high? I go, did you have something excitable happen there? Were you driving your car? Oh yeah, that's when this person pulled over in front of me. Yeah, that's equivalent to you eating a meal,
That's
but it was
so
all done
wild.
internally. So in the liver controls 300 functions of the brain. So when you start to mess with the liver, you're messing with the brain.
Hmm.
You know,
So does something like the brain tap actually rewire the brain, or does it
well,
just calm it
yeah,
down?
it will rewire, but it's more of a fact of the brain's already wired. So
Hmm.
don't. It's like, remember you had 100 billion neuron connections when you were born or more.
Right.
As we age, we actually get dumber. They unplug because it's too much energy. You don't need all that energy. Used to be we'd learn a language, we'd be with a tribe, we'd live 30, 40 years, and, you know, brain was pretty good for that. Now we get to 45, 50 years old, finding out, hey, maybe this lifestyle isn't working too well for keeping this brain sharp. So we got to do some things to keep the brain sharp. So those neuron pathways are still there. They're just not firing. So that's why when you see the stop sign and you've
Hmm.
seen a million stop signs, and every time you've stopped, hopefully. So now your body has a physiological response to a stop sign. Stop.
Yep.
Then you roll your eyes up, think of 3 things, because that's how you picture things anyway. So you're using systems of belief. I use systems of belief in the brain tap that you use every day. Like you've probably heard the one where you walk into you turn on the light switch in the room, and the inner light of awareness shows you this is what you're here for. This is why you're there. Because some people think that when they walk into a room and they don't remember what they're there for, that they have a memory problem. That's not it at all. We have we have working memory and we have long-term memory. And as we get older, our short-term memory, which is our working memory, because we have so much stress, we can only handle 7 plus or minus pieces of information. We walk from one room to the next and it gets pushed out. But if we can start triggering our brain, hey, I walked in here with a reason, to find my
Hmm.
keys or to make me a coffee, whatever it is. And then you'll have less and less of those moments because you're training your brain to recall those things instead of just going into the flywheel effect and letting the subconscious take care of it.
It's so interesting. But it, but like a brain tap, it does calm down your brain,
Oh
right? I
yeah.
mean,
What what we
which
know,
sounds calming sounds like a spa day, but
yeah, that's right. When
rewiring is actual lasting change.
Yes, we call it neuroplasticity is what's happening. So when you think about the brain, it's really electrical function because
Hmm.
we're measuring with electrical waves, and it's kind of like cicadas in the summer. One cicada starts and the rest of them go, and they go in
Ugh.
cycles, and everything's cyclic with the brain and with the body, with the earth, everything. So what happens is as we recruit these different brain waves, beta being wide awake, beta is good for our reactions, and we need it to drive and to interact in life. But if we get too much beta activity, we become too nervous, too anxious, too overreacting, and that's why we need alpha. Alpha is that one you drop down into where maybe you're painting or you're out with friends and you're having a conversation, the time flies and you don't know where it went, because once you get into these timeless states, the brain kind of freewheels. And then if you can drop into theta, which is where we're taking you with a brain tap, beta, we call that the inventive mind. That's where all the things that you have not yet been created but will be created are in that realm, because every great inventor had the same strategy. They would go to sleep like Edison did. He went to sleep with an iron ball in his lap, and he was grasping it, and he knew that as soon as he let go of that ball and hit the plate beneath him, that his solution would come into his mind. Well, he was activating theta. And many inventors use the same similar strategy, because when you get into the dream state, of course, you can fly, you can do whatever you want, but some people bring their limitations with them into their sleep. Maybe they're overweight in the physical world, and they go into their sleep world and they're still overweight. Well, you get to choose what you want to be there. So the first step in BrainTap is teaching you to take control of your dreams and start dreaming the life that you want to live, so that when you wake up, you live that dream instead of, nothing happens to you that doesn't happen through you, in other words.
And,
So
and what if you don't dream? Or are you
everybody
dreaming
dreams,
and you
it's
just
just
don't
not.
know it?
Yeah, everybody dreams. They just, some are not at top of mind awareness. You know, a lot of times that happens if you're, especially if you're not getting enough REM sleep. REM sleep is usually when you get your dream states and things like that. But if you get them, like, first, if you get most of your REM at night when you first go to bed, and then in the rest of the time you're not really dreaming like that. You're just resting. So you can tell by using sleep metrics. A lot of times people are just like coal miners. We did a study with coal miners in Australia, and we had to do a 2-week washout, which meant we wanted to see their sleeping before they used BrainTap. Well, the average coal miner spent 10 hours a night in bed, but they only slept for 1 minute of deep sleep, virtually no REM. So they weren't really sleeping. They were dead tired. They were in bed. So within 3 weeks, they were sleeping better than 70% of the population on Earth, because we taught them how to go to sleep again. The brain already knew how to go to sleep, but because they went to work in the dark, they slept in the dark, they didn't get enough light activation, they didn't know how to reset their circadian rhythm. Because they weren't in, just like what happens to people who work third shifts. Their brain gets all messed up because we're designed to work with the sun. We're not designed to, of course, now we have lights and everything. We can stay up and do whatever we want any hour of the day. When I was a kid,
Wow.
it was a major accomplishment to make it to 12 o'clock and watch the Star Spangled Banner, and the flag being raised, and the TV station would go off.
And then the
You know,
ants dance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Nowadays they go, what do you mean we got 500 other channels we can go to?
All right.
And so, but sleep, I just finished a whole program. It's going to be going live on BrainTap with Dr. Amon's sleep doctor, Dr. Criado. It's called Sleep Like a Champion. It's 15 new sessions that we designed to teach people how to get into that deep delta sleep that they need.
I have to figure out how to keep my brain tap charged, because when I fall asleep listening to one and I want to get up and listen to another one in the morning, then
Sometimes
I
it's dead. It
sometimes
should
it's
shut
dead.
off automatically in 45 minutes.
It does.
Yeah, yeah,
I just might need to charge it more often,
yeah.
but um and it does make a difference on, you were talking about the different types of brain waves,
Mhm.
because there are AM sessions, PM, midday or whatever. Does it matter if you listen to a PM one in the morning?
It doesn't matter that much for PM, but it does matter for the AMs to listen to them in the evening, because they could spark you to have too much energy,
Mm-hmm.
to sleep, especially blue-eyed people. Most people don't realize that the reason a lot of blue-eyed people wear sunglasses where brown-eyed people don't, is because they bring in more light energy. And you have more mitochondria in your eyes than you have any other place in your body per square centimeter. So the brain has the most mitochondria, but your eyes are brain matter. So you're actually absorbing light through your eyes. So some
Even when
people,
your eyes are closed.
even when your eyes are closed, they call it photobiomodulation. So, when we walk outside, our body is filling up with light. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's using that light energy. Now,
Which is a
depending
good
on,
thing for,
yes, it's a
and
good thing.
we don't need to get into all the, the use of sunscreen and
Yeah,
sunglasses
right.
and all that, but it's like we're a battery. It's like our eyes are a battery.
Yes. Every cell of your body has something called a chromophore, and it is a little battery. It holds that charge. And when that gets depleted, that cell cannot operate anymore. It needs energy. So it goes into something called apoptosis, or death. If the light energy can get there before that, that cell will restart that Krebs cycle and be reborn. It's basically a new cell with all the instruction sets and everything. So our cells are not designed to just peter out and die as quickly as they are. You know, they we could be, as far as longevity goes, having more quality to our years. Maybe not more years to our life, but more quality years. You know,
Hmm.
because of more energy.
So it's been so interesting. I've never really paid much attention to the brain until I learned about it, until I started using this and went through the circadian rhythm
Mm,
class and all that.
mm.
So when people are struggling mentally, it's often like they lose control of their own thoughts, and we've talked a little bit about this with, a lot of people trying meditation, breathing exercises, stress management, and they feel like they just can't quiet their mind. So why is it sometimes so hard to just sit still and relax for someone who really needs to do that?
Well, I've actually seen it in the lab, but we've measured about 30,000 brains, and most people don't know how to meditate because when you close your eyes, you shut down 30% of your brain. So your brain automatically doesn't know if it's safe anymore. One of the
Mm,
big things is that's why when we have the light channels being activated, your brain is staying awake. So you know you're okay, you're safe, you're in a loving environment. But what happens to most people is that the amygdala actually they blood slows down to the frontal lobe where you need it the most during meditation, and it feeds the amygdala, which is the primitive brain. So now you got in what the Dalai Lama calls the monkey mind. It starts going crazy. You know,
okay.
so what we've shown is that when you use the brain tap, you put the default mode network on pause. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to work anymore. It's okay. We're giving the frequencies of light, sound, and vibration that are in harmony with nature. They're all either zero point zero 0.05 to 88. These frequencies are earth frequencies. If you were to take a walk with me through the woods, it'd be anywhere between 8 to 12 hertz frequency. If you were to sit next to a body of water, it'd be 10 hertz frequency. We go to a mountaintop at 7.8 hertz frequency. So what we're doing is the body has done this for since inception. And we do know, the Hopi Indians said 7 generations are influencing them. MIT just came out with a study about 14 weeks ago that said 54 generations of our ancestors are influencing our DNA. So when somebody says anxiety runs in my family, yeah, it's running through your genes, but you can turn those on or off. You can learn how to, like in my case, my dad was a very gifted alcoholic. I could be an alcoholic. I'm sure of it, but I don't drink alcohol. So, and somebody goes, well, that's why you're not an alcoholic. I go, well, that's why I'm not, it's like, it's like
Genius.
they go, you're just scared that you're going to be, well, it keeps me from not drinking. I said, if you can tell me 3 good reasons to drink, I'll do it. Nobody's been able to give me 3 good reasons to drink that I couldn't do without drinking. It's
Right.
like, it, and I know what drinking does to the brain. It's if you want to with our meter, we have a little thing called the neurocheck. We can check 9 parameters of the nervous system. If I want to show somebody a black brain, all I have to do is say, go down to the bar, have a drink, come back, and I'll measure you. Their brain will automatically it'll be below 10 volts. That's how taxing it is on the brain, that sugar assault that alcohol has. So a lot of our lifestyle choices that are really not dictated by us as much as the big big
Things
food
that we do.
industries. Like, yeah, they know what makes us crave things: fat, sugar, salt, in abundance, out of proportion to what nature would bring us. And if we don't control it, then it does seem like somebody else is driving the bus, and we can't control our thoughts. But at some point, we've got to start driving the bus. And so I always think back to the simple things I said at the very beginning. Start by drinking plenty of water because hydration is big with people with your brain when you're having these stressed out thoughts. You're using up a lot of energy. I mean, a lot of energy.
Hmm.
It's easy to think creative thoughts and positive thoughts and do your things, and you don't lose energy with those. But when you start thinking about problems you can't solve and situations that you never thought you'd be in, and just one bad thing after the other happens, you've got to have a way to interrupt that pattern and at least have a vacation away from yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of people use drugs to do that, but you can use your own mind to do it. And that's the safest way. And then what happens is the brain says, okay, I understand. You want to have some relief from
Hmm.
all this stress. And and then you can go back to that stress and you build capacity because you want to build resilience. That stress resilience is so important nowadays. I mean, my life isn't just, somebody running in front of me with rose petals and putting them down in front of me and singing songs, there, but, doesn't mean I can't hallucinate that, so, the things that, we have to take what we get, you know, growing up in Alateen and all that. Of course, I have all the languaging that I would need to help me. You change the things you can. And
Mhm.
what I tell people is you have to embrace the things you can't. Those, if you can overcome one of them, you got a superpower now.
Right.
And some people, your superpower might just be to say no to that one person that every time you talk to him leaves you drained. They're like an energy
The
vampire.
energy suckers.
Yes, yeah. And sometimes you just gotta say, you know what? I got a hard stop in 15 minutes. And they get their 15 minutes out and you're done. Because they just needed somebody on the other end to
Hmm.
to talk to. And sometimes when you've heard it for 50 times, you don't want to hear it another time, and then it just spirals you out and ruins the rest of your day until you can. So you really have to become a little selfish for yourself. Not all the time, but you need to have those breaks. If you know something's going to cause you um, high stress, then you want to figure out, okay, how am I going to recover from that stress? What am I going to do? Am I going to go for a walk? I'm going to do some breathing. I'm going to do a brain tap. Whatever it is, you're going to do something because you're going to teach your body that stress doesn't live here anymore. It's just passing through. It's like a open window, and you're going to let the wind go through and just let it go through you, not become you.
Hmm. And that's interesting because I don't want to spend. I have some other questions for you still, so I know we're running out of time. Um, just, I mean, we always tell people to reach out to others, and and then don't just ask somebody how they're doing. Be willing to sit there and listen to how they're doing, and otherwise, it's not the most sincere
Right,
question. But you also have to put boundaries on your own mental health, like you were just
right.
saying. That
I
it's
always
you can
tell,
be
I
there
always,
for people, but
I know people that say I have a three rule. You can tell me that story three times. Then after that, we need to start talking about the solution to that story
that's a good
because
approach.
it seems like you got the story down and it's pretty locked in. And I'm not going to devalue the story. It's real for you and it's hurting you and it's painful, but it's not serving you.
Mm.
So, what could we do creatively together to talk about this in a way that would put it behind you and it would be a lesson learned that you don't have to repeat? Would that be all right?
I
And
like that.
usually they're okay with that. And then, but they have to find something to fill that with because nature doesn't like a void. It's like when they were going to put a shopping center down the road here, they cleared the land, but then they couldn't get the permits. Well, within 6 months, that land was all built up, had weeds in it and it was all grown up because you got to put something else in it. So find something that's going to fill you up. Like I said, if you have friends or you have, start a game night, that's something that is starting now big time. Is like board game
Hmm.
night because people want to get back to a simpler way of living and put on some relaxing music and just have some fun and have conversation and maybe it's only you and one other person. Then you find somebody else and you start to put together a group. I think our communities are breaking down in ways that nobody ever predicted. They thought all this technology is going to bring everybody together. What it's done is people are at dinner together and all have their six iPhones out at the table
Yeah.
and nobody's talking to each other. They're texting each other across the table instead of talking to each other. And I think and I really do believe our mental health crisis is a physiological problem just as much as it is psychological, meaning that they don't get up and move enough. Our
Hmm.
bodies are designed to move and breathe. And this kind of one thing for the listeners too, when you weight lift or you do some kind of exertion, kind of physical activity, you actually make something called BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor. Think of it as miracle growth for the brain. So if you want that's why everyone knows somebody who started working out and they changed their attitude. They became more positive, more upbeat. That's
Hmm.
because when you're breathing and you're doing something positive for your body, you can't help but it just bleeds through other areas of your life. And it's not like you're looking for somebody else to save you. I mean, the person you're waiting for is you. Of course, we all have to have our higher power, whatever that is, and whatever your God is, um, or at least I believe that helps out.
Hmm.
And but you know, here you are, heir to the throne. He or she gave you every skill, every ability, every resource you ever needed, and you're still suffering because you're not listening. And the listening is that if something's not working in your life, change something. You can always go back to what doesn't work. So just start changing something small, not something big like move across the country or get a divorce or, all these things. Do something
Hmm.
small. Maybe if you're having a bad relationship, say, today I'm going to find 3 ways to compliment him or her. And what'll happen is you'll start to see all the good you used to see in them because now you're looking for the reasons to have the good. But
Right.
it's human nature to start to see, oh man, they left the toothpaste cap off. They left their clothes in the middle of the room. They left the door unlocked. They didn't do their dishes before they left. And all that starts building up in the mind and starts building these negative patterns. But we can change that.
To
It's
look for
just
the
a,
good.
yeah, you can change it for the good and you can, but it's something at first you got to do it consciously, but then it'll be unconscious. It'll just be, I know people that when they meet somebody the first time, they're always complimenting them. I just think that's such a great way to start a conversation. You compliment somebody, and
Hmm.
it's genuine. It's not like it's made up. I mean, this person is like, wow. When I saw that, I go, that's a really good habit to get in
It
because you're
is.
automatically looking at the good.
It is. I want to shift to kids for a minute,
Sure.
because I know, a lot of our Glow for Hope listeners include a lot of parents who are exhausted and told there's no fix, just management.
Yeah.
And, over the years, we've seen more and more kids being diagnosed with ADHD and other related disorders. So that is if they're not just labeled as a troubled child and we throw a pill at it. But
Right.
from a brain perspective,
I was
what's
very
actually
fortunate.
happening
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. My first book was actually called Awaken the Genius. And it was written because my mother was smart enough not to give us Ritalin.
Mm.
And what she did was she went to an iridologist who looked at our eyes and they told us what deficiencies we had. And mostly we were geeked up on sugar. My dad worked for the cereal companies. So we got the bad cereals. That's what we ate every day. But we changed all that. We never had white flour in our house. We never had white sugar. We didn't have dyes in our house. And every porter was an honor roll student. Still remember teachers going, "Why are the porters so smart?" It's because we're eating smart. We're eating no junk. My friends didn't like to come over to our house for dinner because it was a normal dinner. We had dessert one every Sunday. That was it. My mom would make a cake or something or a pie, and that was the only time we had dessert. Now we snuck dessert, of course. We were kids. We were over at a friend's house. We're going to have some dessert and that. And my parents would always know when we came back home, filled with sugar. We're bouncing off the walls, and if people
Right.
don't believe sugar does that, just go to a birthday party and see what happens after they break out. So I think that the number one thing people should do, and we've done studies with BrainTap with ADHD and had phenomenal results. We're just Nemon's Hospital, which is the largest mental hospital in the world, is just finalizing an ADHD program that they did with hundreds of people and blew away neurofeedback. I mean, just blew it out of the
Using the
water.
brain tap.
Yes, yeah, using the
Awesome.
BrainTap, and because what they're trying to do is build alpha brainwaves. We showed them that with BrainTap in 4 weeks, you can recruit up to 23% alpha brainwaves. And you do it while you're sleeping. And that's important for adults as well as children. But what happened was the stress that people are under. Remember, those kids aren't just eating bad foods, they're stressed out too. They're
Hmm.
they're in the same world. Being now, instead of school being a safe place, a fun place, now it's, oh no, they might have a germ, or that might be a germ, or these people might be bombing us. Let's there's a tornado coming. Whatever's happening there, it's not the same world that I lived in. I mean,
Yeah.
the I mean, I walked to school, so things like that. So it's a very different world, and I think that with social media too. I mean, the most popular things I put out on social media, I don't even put them out myself. Somebody on the team does. They find a 9-second clip of something I said and it gets listened to a million times. It's like, but that was only like 9 seconds. But that's all the time they have, right? So they listen to nine. They say that we have the same attention span as a goldfish, about 5 seconds. So we need to look at that. But there
I
are
thought it
ways.
used to be like 7 minutes or something, the
Yes,
adult
yeah,
attention
yeah.
span.
Well, you know how TV figured out how much time they could. When TV first came out, they only had one commercial block in
Hmm.
every half hour. But then they found out they couldn't keep their attention, so they put another commercial block in. Now we get a commercial block every 15 to 20 minutes because that's how long they can keep people's attention before they turn the channel or go somewhere else.
That's if you
So
don't pay for the premium and you can
yes,
slide
right,
right by them. That's me.
right. So with children, what we like best is, and my dad also, when he got help with his alcoholism, he never parented us the same way again. if you were one of my brothers or sisters and you were to get in trouble at our house, my dad would say, "See my bookshelf over there? Go grab a book off the shelf, read a chapter, and tell me how you're going to apply that in your life."
Nice.
And
I
so
used to have to write the Bible,
oh, there you go. Yeah, well, you're going to get there some way.
starting with Proverbs.
Right, right. So, but what it got us thinking about was most people say, "Go to your room and think about what you did." That's the worst thing you can do to a kid
Why?
because they already know what they did. They did the best they could at the information they had. What if they could have done something different? So, I used to say to my kids when they were growing up, it was called the MC Square at the time, the light and sound machine that I had at that time. I said, go do your MC Square session, come back out and tell me how you do that differently. And they always would. I said, so next time you're going to do it that way? Yeah. You want to give choices to the brain. If the brain doesn't have choices, then it creates anxiety and fear and stress. But as long as you have choices, I mean, think about people who, when I had an office in Virginia Beach, and I seen a lot of Black Hawk helicopter pilots.
Mm-hmm.
So I got curious because they're always going down. I mean, who'd want to fly these things? They seem like they fall out of the sky all the time. And I said, "What's going on? Why are these Black Hawk helicopter?" He goes, "Well, you have to understand that pilot is steering the ship with his arms or her arms. There's different missiles and things they have to push on top of that. Both feet are running the rudders. So they're literally like moving all over
Wow.
the place. Now they're hearing their crew in one ear, they're hearing the tower in the other ear. One eye has a heads up display with all the pieces of information. They have one eye that's looking out where they're going, and then somebody starts shooting at them. I mean,
Wow.
so they actually train people out of that program because you got to find somebody that's brain's already wired to handle that much stress. Most people can't handle it. And they said like not even 1 out of 50 people can do it. So I mean, it's like but you could train the brain to do it, but it would take a lot longer. But so they're just, what they do in boot camps and stuff is they just like the Navy SEALs, they're trying to get you to quit because they're trying to find your breaking point. And those people that don't have a breaking point, they become Navy SEALs. Because they don't know when is. They keep moving that win line. But then that
Right.
hurts them later with PTSD because there's win lines in life. You can't be in a state of hyperactivity, high vigilance all the time because your body will burn out. You'll treat people poorly, and your life won't work.
Trade-offs everywhere.
Yeah,
It's, you use the phrase mental hygiene, which I
yeah,
love. We brush our teeth
yeah.
every day, but we don't really think about clearing out the stress of our minds every day. It what does mental hygiene actually look like in real life? Is that like what you were talking about
Yeah.
early on
Well,
with?
all these things I'm talking about, mental hygiene, especially in those moments when you get to hear your own thoughts. Most people are so uncomfortable with their own thoughts. But we have a tape loop of 5,000 words or more, they say, that just plays in our head all the time, reminds us who we are. And it could be good or bad, but we can change that tape loop. But we have to change it on the fly. That's where the BrainTap sessions come in. You start using some of the phrases that might be on them with yourself, like saying the word stop and things like that, because your brain goes, you know what, that's useful. I'm going to use that. I'm going to put this in this tape loop to remind me. And a
Mhm.
lot of times people think they had a bad day. So then they think, oh no, that bad day is going to lead to a bad week. It's going to lead to a bad month. It's going to lead to a bad year. And all of a sudden they don't get out of bed till they catastrophize enough to prove themselves right. And
Mm.
so the whole thing is about you can't afford a negative thought. When Buddha said over 5,000 years ago, he who angers you conquers you. Medical science has proven to us that if we think a negative thought about another person, our brain has to create the same neurological activity of that negative thought in our body. We are literally the poison that we're trying to deliver to somebody else. So that's when Jesus said, "Hey, pray for your enemy." Then you're restoring health and vitality to you. And if they feel it, they feel it. It's like you shouldn't let the sinner sin twice. If they harmed you or did something wrong to you, then part of mental hygiene is saying, "Hey, you know what? I I can't live with it. I don't like it. I mean, it's totally terrible. They should be in jail, maybe, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't serve me to carry that memory around and remember it every day
Yeah.
because now I'm the prisoner of that memory. So mental hygiene is take that memory and say, you know what? I forgive them for not living up to my expectations of them. And I let
Very
them
good.
go. And you have to do it in an earnest way that says, you know what? They have to live with themselves. That's what I always tell people. These crazy people, we all know them. The world, we don't have a bunch of cheerleaders waiting for us to get up like the old Starbucks commercial, when we're going out to get our coffee. People are, their own car trying to get where they're going to go, trying to get to the 401 or whatever before the big car pile up or whatever. So it's stop trying to think that the world is against you and just think, how can I play this game we call life on my terms?
Hmm.
And I've been told I'm too damn positive. So, you have to take that into account. I had a business person once, he says, Porter, you're too damn positive. You got to get a little negative. You're in business. I said, well, I'd rather be disappointed every once in a while than be disappointed every day when I wake up.
Very true.
Because, you're going to have disappointments. Okay. Somebody's not going to live up to your expectations. Somebody's not going to do what they said they were going to do. Yeah. And if they do it too often, they're not my friend anymore. It's like, but you have to set the boundaries. Some people don't set boundaries and they get walked on, and then they wonder why people will go about as far as you let them.
Right.
So that's why I said if you have that person, and I do it jokingly, I say, you know what, I've heard that story a couple of times. I think I'm going to give you one more time on that.
I love that whole,
And
okay, let's think about the solution now.
yeah, and then I say, now then what we're going to do is we're going to do some fun with it. Let's change it all around. Let's change the players around. Do some Gestalt therapy and stuff. Just to change it around. What if you were your mom or your dad and you had this little kid? What would you do differently? They don't even know they're doing therapy, but they start, and then pretty soon. I remember doing this to my grandma when she was 90. She hadn't seen her sister in 40 years. They're both 90 years old. They're not going to be around too much longer, and they're going to be in the same city. I found out. So I went there and I started talking to my grandma, and I was just talking to her. And it just kept bringing up Aunt Kathleen. And first, a little bit, she'd get all angry, tell me the story, and I would rearrange it. She'd tell me the story again, I'd rearrange it. By the end of that conversation, she goes, you know what? I think Aunt Catherine's going to be in Battle Creek at the same time I'm going to be. You think you can set up a meeting? So we
Nice.
did. And they got to me. But she was letting something happen 40 years ago that probably wasn't even the real thing anymore. I tell
Probably
people,
doesn't even remember what it was.
yeah, the listeners, think of your memories like leftovers. You and I went out to dinner, Kelly. We had such a great dinner that we didn't eat much because we were talking, and we looked down, our food's cold. We're going to take it home. They put it in a white paper box. We take it home to our refrigerators. I do it like I usually do. It pushes to the back of the refrigerator. I never eat it. Pretty soon it's stinking in there. And I got some friends coming over. So I got to get back in there, crawl back in there, and I see this white box. I open it up. It's green and fuzzy. What do I do with it? I throw it away.
Throw it away.
I don't send it off to CSI to find out if my mom and dad made that meal, or if Father Fitzpatrick told me to do so, whatever it was. I just say, this is junk. Most memories are like that. Just get rid of them. They're no longer necessary. You're in a new place. In fact, I tell people, if you could just jump up and down and stay in the same place, you'd be literally millions of miles away from where you are right now. Our Earth is spinning at 144,000 miles around our solar system, moving at 200 and something million miles an hour around a galaxy that's moving at trillions of miles. I mean, we're so far removed from when we started this conversation, we can never be in the same place. But people will try to keep those, they'll defend their beliefs till they're dead, and they don't serve them anymore. And just let go of all your expectations of people. I mean, you should have high expectations.
Expectations are huge.
But don't expect them to be like you. If you're loving and caring and sharing and all this, that's a rare breed. And that's usually the people who are probably listening to these kind of podcasts because they're looking for, hey, I'm doing all this good in the world. Why is everybody turning around and peeing in my Wheaties? The whole idea is that they don't even know you have Wheaties.
Yep.
They only know their own life. And so if we can kind of get the mindset that, hey, we're here to enjoy it. This is a game. It doesn't last that long. That's what I love about Stoic history. When you read about they were always talking about, they kind of had a little bit more of a negative take on the future. But I believe that we need to live like the shaman. And the shaman say, live today as if it's your last. So if you want to kiss somebody, it's your last day. You want to do something good, it's your last day. But plan your life like you're going to live forever. So that doesn't mean go destroy your body this one day you have left, and go do something crazy. And I think that if people would understand that, when you get to be 40, 50, 60, 70 years old and you're going, gosh, my body's giving out on me. God didn't give me the right genetics. Well, God didn't give you that Snickers bar for lunch, or, drink all that alcohol in college or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
this body is the sum total of who you've been your whole life. So now you can, but if you're aware now, I can tell you right now, your brain will improve at any age. We've done studies with 90-year-old women had 19% improvement in their brain function in less than 6 weeks.
It's
So there's
amazing.
no time like today to start improving your brain function. And part of that is realizing that this is all a game. It's real in this consequences, but it's a game. And the people that learn how to play it at a high level and have fun and enjoy themselves, they don't get bogged down in all the little stuff. The little stuff takes care of itself, and they take care of the big stuff, and they don't get too far, they don't get too high, and they don't get too low, and they just kind of keep, they look for ways to have fun. In other words, they don't look for ways to be miserable, you know.
Right. Right. Very important.
Mhm.
So a lot of people feel like they need to just like overhaul their whole entire life to feel better with new routines and new habits and complete resets. But you you don't look at it that way.
No, that usually never works because when you try to do too much at one time, the brain loves change, but it hates wholesale change. It likes change it can predict and that it
Mm-hmm.
it sees coming, but if you try, so I always recommend look at all the things you want to change about your life and list them in the order of what would make you happiest if this was to change, and start with that one, and then start
Nice.
knocking them off the list. And pretty soon you won't have a list anymore because they'd have taken care of themselves. Some of them probably like a domino, take care of one of them, three or four of them fall off the list. And the thing is that it is good to have a list of things you'd like to improve about yourself, but don't get down on yourself. You are the sum total of all your beliefs. Your best thinking brought you to this moment in time. So you don't want to discount who you were. That devalues you as a person. You did the best you could. You want an upgrade. So that upgrade starts today. You know, if I could go back in time and there's some choices I'd like to make, if I could go back in time, but I can't. So I got to live with those decisions and then make lemonade out of them, if you will, instead of
Right.
focusing on the lemons.
You've worked with everyone from everyday people to elite performers. What's the one thing you wish more people understood about their own brain?
What I find is a peak performer doesn't doubt that they can do it. They just feel like they need the magic abracadabra, or they need whatever it is. They have such belief in their own abilities, their own skills, that they just think they're missing that one magic thing, that
Mm-hmm.
one magic pill or potion. And I think, and it's true for everybody really, because the magic potion is you.
Yeah.
If you wake up to your true self, you wake up to who you really are, the brilliance that you are, the intelligence that you are, the everything that you can create and do, you wouldn't have to ask for help from somebody. They'd be asking you. And I think so many people think life happens to them instead of through them. And one thing about peak performers, they believe they bend time. You know, they the planets rearrange themselves so they get a sunny day when they're doing a photo shoot outside. They believe they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, it's been in action for millions of years, before they even thought about it. But they believe that life is actually conspiring with them for their success. And so in really life is doing that for all of us. And I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people your superpowers are being developed by the life you're living right now. Because whatever's going on in your life right now, whatever dark night of the soul, there's never been a superhero ever written about that didn't have to go through the dark night of the soul to realize that they could overcome that limitation. That's Campbell's cycle, right? The hero's journey. We're all going
Yeah.
through that hero's journey. And if you can realize where you're at on that journey, everybody goes through it. If I talk to somebody long enough, I'm gonna tell them, you haven't even entered into your worst yet, because you're still out here. You got to step in there. You got to feel that feeling and move
Yep.
beyond. You got to feel that fear and say, that fear is nothing, because fear is false evidence appearing real. It's not real. I mean, I don't have a fear of gravity. It's a law of gravity, right? I mean, I know if I jump off a building, I have a fear of jumping off a building, but it's not gravity I'm fearing. It's going to work whether I believe it or not. So the reality is that I think that peak performers or these high level performers, they
Mm-hmm.
they're shocked if things don't go their way.
Yep.
Where other people are surprised when it does. They go, "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" And then their brain goes, "Okay, you can't believe it. That won't happen again. Don't worry about it." don't believe it. This is the way it works.
That's great because people think you're cocky after that,
Right. Yeah, you don't want to say it out loud. It's kind of like doing those you want to do the breath work in your bathroom or something.
Now, we have mentioned many times here BrainTap, but we haven't
Yep.
really said what it is. So
Yeah.
you want to give a quick rundown on what that is before we...
BrainTap is an app, which I said they can download. You can give them a link in your bio notes or something. And that link will give them 15 days where they can try it out for free. We don't charge them to the 15th day, but 90% of the people that download that app get their best night's sleep during that time. So I'd recommend they really observe their sleep and do it before sleep. That's one of the best ways. So we have an app.
And you don't have to have the headset for it to be effective, correct?
Right. Yeah, it's going to be a little faster with the headset. We found that like the sleep study, they got where they needed to be three weeks before the others. So if you listen, you're going to get the results. Just like watch. Some people like to read books. Some people like to listen to books. It's one of those kind of things. So, but when you add that added headset, we're adding light, sound, and vibration with the headset. Those three therapies are going to put you into a physiological state where you're more apt to learn. And it's really about learning, because everything you are today is the sum total of everybody you've been around, everything you've been exposed to, everything you think is going to make you the biggest and brightest and best person. And so what we need to do is get the real bigger and brighter, best person to show up. And sometimes that's not in physical form. It's in your mind right now. It's not manifested because somebody told you can't smile all the time. Nobody's that happy. Or, things don't go your way. That's just a joke, and so you got to say, no, things go my way. You don't say it out loud, but you're saying it to yourself. Things go my way.
Right.
I make the green lights when I go to the grocery store, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But those are the things that happen. These little.
No,
things,
I chant to my car for the front row parking spot.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. So they're all game. It's if you make life a game and you play it at that level, and you like playing games, you have a good time. If you don't like playing games, then you're in the wrong universe, because everybody's out there playing a game.
Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up here?
No, I think just anybody out there listening, just know that we're here to support you. I believe everybody's a genius. So I'll leave you with this message. And in Roman mythology, they said we all have a genie, and that genie houses our talents and skills. If we communicate with that genie and use those skills and abilities, we become genius. So I'm going to hope that each of you listen to your little genie, show your genius up, because the world needs it right now. They need you at the top of your game, having as much fun as possible and sharing that joy with those in your family and your friends.
Nice. I love that. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for being here and for helping break this down in a way that actually makes sense. I think one of the biggest takeaways from today is that you're not broken. Sometimes we're just a little out of sync, and the brain that got you there is the same brain that can bring you back.
Yep.
To everyone listening, if today's episode resonated with you, whether you're the one struggling or trying to feel like yourself again, let this be your reminder that small steps matter. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to start somewhere. If this episode meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. That's how we spark conversations. It's how we build community. And it's how we ignite hope to keep people moving forward. Until next time, keep shining. Thank you for joining us on Glow for Hope. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your mental wellness matters, and you are never alone. For more resources and support, visit glowforhopenfp.org. That's glowforhopenfp.org. Stay connected, stay hopeful, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining.
This podcast does not and is not intended to provide medical advice. The information presented on this podcast should not be interpreted or construed in any way as a replacement or substitution for medical advice. It is important that you discuss your condition, treatment options, or any questions that you may have with your doctor or healthcare provider.